Hello and welcome. This is Jen Cosmano, a naturopath, and I wanted to bring nutritional balancing or hair mineral analysis to not only my clients, but anybody who may have some questions on how the biochemistry of the body works a little bit on a simple level. This is also called orthomolecular medicine. It's a wonderful science that was brought to me by Dr. Paul Eck, who was genius in his work, and unfortunately it was not carried through the way it was intended to. So I am trying to give people a little bit of education and insight. I'll give you a little bit of some story that I have followed through the years, and hopefully give you enough insight to have you go and find either a naturopath or someone like myself to do some mineral work with you. So let's get started by understanding who Paul Eck was. Now, I have spent many mornings at 5:30 a.m. listening and reading Dr. Paul Eck's work. Dr. Larry Wilson also worked with him, and he is now currently working on his own. Dr. Eck passed away in the early part of the millennium. His family is still operating his lab in Arizona very successfully and trying to keep his work alive. And so this is something that I really love to give to my clients, the history of this. And Dr. Eck was a naprothist, which is a body worker chiropractor, an older styled chiropractor, where not only was there manipulation, but there was also thoughtfulness on the soft tissue of the body as well. And he did work with nutrition, especially the understanding of how nutrition works with the body, and got involved with hair analysis in, I believe it was the 70s. And it from what I understand from talking with his family, it was a true passion of his, and laboratory time was inevitably his largest time spent in his life, which is why we have this gift given to us that we really do not want to waste. So that little circle that looks like a ball of yarn is the original picture that he would work off of. And I've heard him tell stories of how he was on a plane and he was trying to figure out somebody's hair mineral analysis, and someone passed by and thought it was like a horoscope, and all of a sudden the entire plane, now you have to remember this is years ago when we were all allowed to walk around planes, the plane was all around Dr. Eck and fascinated by his work, until the captain had to say, everybody come back to your seats, we're flying sideways, backwards, or up, the wrong weight balance of the plane. So it's very interesting to have heard these stories and kind of had and really been taken in by this man who had such a passion for what he did. But this original diagram, and you can't really see it by this, but there's little arrows there so that he could work with this to see if he was going to be utilizing minerals and vitamins due to the way that the minerals worked inside the body with imbalance. So if one mineral went up, he had a systematic approach as to how he was going to create more balance in the body by working with other minerals. And that's called the whole systems approach, which it's very naturopathic. When you look at something as a naturopath, you're not trying to look at something symptomatically. You're trying to look at the whole body and never try to correct a symptom. And that was the beauty of this work, is that it was so finite that every day was just a little tick on the clock. And as time grew, so did the results. And they were more sustained, because when you give the body time like that to heal, it's going to hold into its healing patterns much better. If you And we all know, everybody's into fasting, and fasting is, can be a good thing. But if you utilize fasting all the time, it's like if you give somebody a hammer, everything's a nail, right? So if you constantly fast, the body is constantly going to go into that alert mode and an alarm reaction, and that's not a good thing. And as a body worker myself, as a neuromuscular therapist, I always know when somebody comes in that is getting worked on by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, because the first moment that I touch them, their body contracts against me, and that's an alarm reaction. And as you get more experienced and mastering things in your life, you start to see these alarm reactions. And Dr. Eck had this absolutely mastered on the human biochemistry. And I'm still every day learning something new from rereading and looking at notes that I've created over the last decade and a half. He also tried to really get to people to understand one mineral never works without another. So if you have low calcium, you can't take calcium to raise your calcium. As a matter of fact, it usually does exactly the opposite of what you think it's going to do, and it can end up very detrimental in the ability to be able to lift a mineral. He also was very famous for toxic metal research and showed the court system that toxic metals are best taken from a hair sample for analysis than any other way. And this is because toxic metals are taken in and displaced for other minerals in the body. So if you are low and lacking on something, it will look for the closest toxic metal of an element wise to displace it into the body to take its place. And that was absolutely amazing work. And then also, and as all naturopaths, your body wants to stay alive. It doesn't want to die. So it wants to heal itself. And sometimes you have to listen to that and really start to understand it's not going to be tomorrow. It's probably not even going to be next month. This is slow, preventative processes of the body and its anatomy. So I can't say enough about Dr. Pollack. He is absolutely, to me, should have won a Nobel Prize for most of his work. But again, it was given to the wrong person at the wrong time, and it was swept under the carpet just like so many other naturopaths. Now, I can say that I have verbally heard Dr. Eck going to work with Dr. Kelly. And if you don't know who Dr. Kelly is, he was a famous cancer doctor from in the Midwest who Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez eventually ended up carrying on his work. But Dr. Eck was going to go work with Dr. Kelly and Dr. Bernard Jensen, who was a famous iridologist, on a case. He doesn't say which case. He was discussing it in an interview, and Dr. Kelly is mentioned in references quite often in Dr. Eck's work. And there are many points to Dr. Eck's work, especially with sodium-potassium ratios, that say that your ability to be able to digest proteins, and he says the inability to be able to digest proteins is what creates degenerative diseases. And I'm not going to say the big C word, but you know what degenerative diseases are. That sodium-potassium ratio was so important. And that's where all of the stress theory came from, with everybody jumping on the wagon to try to look into cortisol. But we can go back to Hans Selye, who originally created these theories of stress, and look at the autonomic nervous system. And Hans Selye said, stress, no matter how it is given to you, reacts upon the body the same way. When you get stressed and the body goes into an alarm reaction, it's going to increase your heart rate, your respiratory rate, your blood pressure, pupil dilation, your digestion decreases, your urine production decreases, right? You have to run. And when you run, you can't have the ability to be able to digest food. It takes up too much energy. So that is really controlled by the sodium potassium of the body. On the other side, the parasympathetic system is rest and digest, and that gives the body that calming, right? Calcium and magnesium. Everybody's taking magnesium to go to bed. Well, guess what? If you balanced your adrenals and your sodium potassium ratio, you wouldn't need to take magnesium before you go to bed. And just like I said before, taking one mineral can disrupt other minerals, at least minimally two. So the parasympathetic system is going to decrease all the things that the sympathetic nervous system increases. So they work in unison with each other. Now, in a perfect world, one raises and then it lowers, and then the other raises and then it lowers, and then it comes to a really nice homeostatic point, which is calm. And then you go to sleep. You wake up, it goes up, you eat breakfast, it comes down, the sympathetic system goes up, you go out and you work, and it does this all day long. But if you're in a constant stress situation, that's where it starts to get burnt out. And so let's talk about that a little bit. So you wake up, you immediately get agitated because you look at social media and you see something that irritates you. There's your first sympathetic nervous system reaction. Then you go down, you eat, and the sympathetic nervous system is going to have to try to shut down, but it can't because you're still agitated and you're still talking about it. So you're eating while in sympathetic dominancy. Then you go to work and you're driving, somebody cuts you off, somebody beeps their horn, you're late. You go to work, the person in the office is angry because you needed to have something to them and you were late, and now your day has started in sympathetic dominancy. And it continues to go through the day like this. You actually never get to the point where you come down and relax from your day. You get back in your car, you go home, you're late, your wife got angry because you're late, or your husband or your kids or whoever you're with, and you don't go to sleep and you wonder why. Or you jump on a piece of exercise equipment and you go absolute ballistic because you're angry. These are all things that are going to create imbalance in your body, and they're going to constantly be driving up your sodium potassium levels until there's nothing left for your body to be able to give. Those sodium potassium levels start to drop drastically, and calcium, magnesium start to build in the body. And they're not building naturally because they don't have sodium potassium to actually pump them into a quote-unquote liquefied state to be able to assimilate them. So they start building into what's called a shell. That's what Dr. Ack called it. And I'm going to use his terms because I really like them. They really give you a bigger picture. It's called calcium out of solution, and it means the calcium is no longer able to flow through the body and go into where it's supposed to be deposited. So now the calcium and the magnesium start to build, and we can go into the calcium club from South Africa. You start to build calcium everywhere, cellularly, and then into your organs, into your arterial system, into your soft tissue, and you start to feel like a rigid person. You look like a rigid person. Your arterial system starts to get lined with calcium, and guess what? That just makes it a great host for cholesterol to build up. It's not the cholesterol that's the problem. It's the calcium that's coating all of the cellular parts of the body. So that's where stress relief starts to make sense. You have to really get the body to come down every time it goes up, not to react, to go, I'm not going to react. I'm going to let my body come back down, and I'm going to try to fix it the best I can. So Hans Selye's stress theory of disease were that all symptoms were just adaptations. So every time something happened to you and you had a symptom, it was just your body adapting to something that was a stress reaction, and then it's going to compensate for that. And if you have the proper nutrition, the compensation will just be that it's going to take from what you have. You're probably going to have a bit of tiredness, and you need to rest a little bit so that your body builds it back up. But that's it. It shouldn't be more than just, you may need a little extra rest. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and environmental. And environmental is huge because people don't realize that, oh, I have, all this stuff on everything in my house. But, bathing is part of that. Your body absorbs a lot of water during bathing. And the air you breathe is going to be really important too. So I happen to be a lucky person to be able to be out in a countryside most of my life. My father moved us to the country of, suburbia, really. We went from suburbia to the country. And I'm not going to say the deep west of the country, but, the East Coast country when I was 12. So I've been very lucky. And I always tell people, go for day trips. Get out of the suburbs and the city and get some fresh air. It can be internal or external, which means you can have it come onto the outside of your body as easily as you can take it internally. And acute or chronic is anything past, I would say, personally, I say 3 months, because some, like I'm working on somebody that fell and they got a typical, what is called a frozen shoulder. It's a subscapularis and pec minor dysfunction. And I told them immediately, this is going to be 3 to 6 months. So if I wasn't working on them at the 3 to 6 months mark, that would have not just been chronic. It would have probably been like they would have had to go in for rehabilitation. So I'll use 3 months because that happens to be something that I think personally at this point in my career I would agree with. And then oxidation types are fast, slow, and mixed. Dr. Eck worked on those with understanding somebody's oxidation based on their energy of their metabolism. And it doesn't always mean that if you're a slow oxidizer, that you're heavy, because it's actually the opposite. Slow oxidizers tend to be people who are easily able to get muscle, what would be called striation or looking cut. And fast oxidizers are the ones who always struggle with having a little bit of body fat. And it's because of the way that their system is constantly needing, a fast oxidizer needs to be slowed down. And if they eat too much into like a carbohydrate pattern, they will gain weight. Whereas a slow oxidizer is used to kind of grazing through the day, and because they always need a little bit of energy. And so you can give them a little protein and they'll nicely lose weight and sustain that energy for longer periods of time. So compensations and adaptations are really the game. Every day of your life, your body is compensating and adapting. And it's just part of the whole cycle of life. So we want to make sure that that compensation and adaptation keeps coming back to a neutral balance. And cellularly organism lifestyle is really how it starts to go. So with hair mineral analysis, you're getting a picture of something for the future. Just like iridology, which I'm also an iridologist, which is another really lost art. And not even art, science, because Germany still uses it in their medical industry. So cellularly, the first things that are going to happen are going to be that small. And by the time it gets up to the organism or the lifestyle where you've had to change things, maybe you stopped exercising because you were tired, it's already been years. So when you start to do your mineral balancing, you have to unlayer years worth of biochemical and reactions that weren't coming back to that neutral position. All diseases are manifestations of adaptations and compensations, all of them. Even if you were born with a genetic disease, it's an adaptation and a compensation from a previous relative. And it can be passed down for 2 generations. And the wars are a perfect example, from people that were environmentally intoxicated by things from the war actually had damage to their DNA, and they can pass that down two generations. So we have to look at that too. As we start to blame everything that happens in our world on something, we really have to look back and say, it may not have been this lifetime, this particular time of my life that it happened. It could have actually been genetically, DNA from my grandparents. And therefore, when we go into DNA analysis, are we really looking at reality? Because if it could have changed on grandpa, it can change on you. And don't give yourself that label. That's why I like compensations and adaptations are all diseases manifestations. Because then you look at it and go, well, then I can change it. And you can change anything. The minute that you put a label on yourself, you're going to walk around with that label for the rest of your life. So try your best to not identify anything that you have too radically. Every day is a new day. Resolve the issue first, meaning your whole body issue, not the symptom. Resolve the issue that's creating it, and it can be any one of those: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or environmental. A lot of people create their own diseases. Oxidation rates, major ratios, and heavy metal readings are going to be absolutely the most important thing in a hair mineral analysis. So now that we have looked at the autonomic nervous system, let's look at how stress responds biochemically. So the first stress response that you have in that sympathetic dominancy is going to be your adrenal glands are going to turn on, and adrenaline is going to start to activate the sympathetic nervous system, and aldosterone, which is a cortical hormone, is going to raise your sodium levels. And when those sodium levels start to raise, and we can see this here, when we go up into this alarm stage, the sodium level is going to start to lift, and you are going to have a key inflammatory response as the body speeds up. And so the NAK is going to go high based on the fact that sodium is going up first. And that's the first response that you have. And then potassium is going to rise due to the NAK ratio, the sodium-potassium ratio being so critical in your body for survival and that pump. And it's going to do that by cortisol secretion as an anti-inflammatory with the sympathetic nervous system and secretion of the adrenals. So those two things are going to happen relatively quickly. Sodium rises from aldosterone, cortisol gets released and brings the potassium level up, so that the sodium-potassium relationship in your body is in a good place, 2.5. All right, so there we are right here. It's alarming you to run like heck from the dinosaur, all right? And that's really the best way to look at it. Is it obviously everybody says fight, flight, or fight, right? But what does that mean? It means your body just got agitated against something, and it was you being alarmed that something stressful is going on. And so that's where we were before, saying that can happen anywhere, right? You could get agitated from an argument. You could get agitated from a toxin. You could eat something that's agitating you. You could have been born agitated, which I'm sure you know plenty of people who seem like they were born agitated. So now we're in very fast oxidation, and the body is at a premium of sodium, potassium, and the calcium and the magnesium are going to start to drop because they're antagonistic to sodium and potassium. So as I said before, sodium and potassium they're solvents, monovalent solvents. They are going to be what is going to put calcium and magnesium, those hard minerals, into the ability to be able to be dissolved. Dr. Eck called it in solution, as I said before. So this is an adaptation to stress, and the body starts to set it up due to that fight or flight. So now some people are going to get stuck here because it feels kind of good to be stuck in this position. You're really at this high position of, the adrenal glands just doing all this work, and you get a lot done, right? Because if you've ever experienced getting your cage rattled by something, and then all of a sudden you have all this energy to do stuff, and that's what happens. You have those two agitating minerals get your body to start getting excited. So from this point, you're going to start to lose calcium, magnesium, zinc, and copper during this point as the sodium potassium rises, because those are minerals that are going to get depleted. And if you start pushing yourself too high into fast oxidation, you actually can start taking up mercury very easily, but also copper, cadmium, and lead. Not copper, cadmium and lead, although copper raises sodium. So now these toxic metals can be hidden in your body very easily, and one of the things that we look at when we look at hair analysis is how much toxic metal is coming out. And the reason being is because it should be coming out regularly, and it shouldn't be in huge amounts either. I heard a doctor once tell a client, oh, well, that means that it's coming out of the body. Well, if you have a 4.0 on a hair analysis with mercury, it is not just coming out of your body. Dr. Eck had very, very finite amounts that were considered safe as far as it coming out and leaving the body in elimination. So we're not going to just start making things up at this point and feeling like we can just say whatever we want based on what we have seen on the internet. This is laboratory science and biochemistry and physiology. Nobody made this up. This has been around for a long time. Dr. Eck worked with this model to show people how the body works biochemically. So now we're up in this very fast position. We're losing minerals. We're now uptaking maybe some toxic metals, and the glands are going to start to slow down. The adrenal system can't keep up with this, and the first that's going to drop is sodium. And when you drop sodium in this position, sodium's going to start to come down. You're going to be fast oxidating in an inversion of sodium potassium. So we have sodium below potassium, and there's our inversion, and still in fast oxidation because we're still above calcium and magnesium. So the resistance phase is still fast, but losing energy. So we're really trying to resist. Here's that resistance stage. As it starts to drop, we're still fast, but we're losing energy. We're starting to feel that sodium, that agitator starting to leave. As sodium drops, eventually calcium is going to follow it because that's what it loves to do. And you're going to have more mineral deficiencies, especially manganese, in addition to that zinc. The adrenal system can't keep up anymore because you're burning it out. And then you're going to start to lose your B vitamins, your C vitamins, your E vitamins, all needed for adrenal function. So you see where this is going, right? The adrenals are going to slow first, and then the thyroid usually slows second. Not in every case, but most of the time, the adrenals are the first to burn out, and then the thyroid will slowly follow that. Now, as that happens, the NAK, which is your sodium potassium ratio, is going to start to drop. And as that drops, you're going to start stressing out your kidneys. You're going to start having some issues with liver, maybe some degenerative diseases. We know what that is, that big C word. And you're now slowly going into what's called the exhaustion stage. Eventually, that NAK drops below the calcium and magnesium. And periodically, you go into a mixed oxidation, but in this case, we're going into slow oxidation, and the body is now in adrenal burnout and slow oxidation with a high calcium magnesium level. This is going to start to create a huge amount of energy loss, huge amount of fatigue, depression. It's going to start to make you feel like you don't know why you're so tired anymore. And there could be disruptions depending on how high the calcium and magnesium go in so many other areas, because we were talking about a calcium shell. And then the mineral deficiencies continue. So not only do we have manganese and zinc, now chromium, and now the toxic metal accumulation starts to get crazy. And every time you're missing zinc, you're going to start picking up cadmium. Cadmium usually props zinc up, and cadmium gives you lots of energy. One of the reasons why people get stuck on smoking. But for this sake and purpose, everything is now starting to take up into the body because there's just nothing there for the body to really grasp onto for energy. And then eventually the NAK gets lower and lower, and you go into very slow, extreme slow oxidation. And that's when you can start to build a calcium shell, or worse yet, your calcium magnesium drop and you go into a 4 lows, which is where we start to see people wanting to take their own lives because there's not a whole lot left to give. So this is all correctable by just getting the biochemistry to balance out. It's not anything magical. It's been around for a long time. George Watson was the oxidation type guy that started the ball rolling with that. Hans Selye with the stress theory. Dr. Eck brought this to the next level of understanding how to start to identify the layers in between, so that when somebody came to you, not only could you look at their biochemistry hair analysis, but you could take some notes on their personality, and when you took intake, some of their things that they've had symptoms with over the past year or two, and you could start to draw some deductions from that as to where you may need to go to, and telling them this is going to take you time. We don't want to think that you are going to just unwind this and bring it back to this perfect place without going through all of these steps. And that's called a healing reaction. And that's a really important part of this work. And it's natural and it's okay. But there's a lot more that goes on with this than just this chart. The next thing I'm going to show you is how many minerals can be involved during this process of elimination. So this is a blank analysis, and this is what I would show my clients, and this is something that I'm going to give to you right now because I want to show you the complexity of a hair analysis. Now, not everything is on here, and everything that is written there isn't exact because there's too much to know, but I wanted to give you some main points. And this is why when I give somebody their lab and they come back to me and say, oh, my sodium level is high, that means I'm going to have high blood pressure, I look at them and say, did you listen to the lab analysis? Because the first thing I say is don't ever look at one level, because sodium isn't a bad thing in your body. It breaks down calcium. It's not ever to be looked at as one part of this chart. But what you should look at is this level right here. I believe, from what I have listened to in the past on Dr. Eck, this was a group of college students that were tested to get this black line through the center, which is what Dr. Eck believed to be absolute perfect. Ideal is the blue area, which was a compilation of the healthiest people that he worked with. And this is calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, iron, copper, manganese, zinc, chromium, selenium, and phosphorus. So they go, this is your first 4 macro minerals, and then it goes into your trace minerals all the way down to phosphorus, which is considered a macro. And then you have 5 heavy metals, and then 5 additional minerals. Now, most of these minerals over here aren't really as important, but nickel can be an indicator of some degenerative diseases. And then we have the ratios on the bottom. And this is your ideal, and then each end is high, and they'll give you what the ratio should look like and then what your ratio is. So there's quite a bit that you can look at this chart and talk about. But when I discuss it on the first time for people, I really look at the macro minerals and I try to give them what's called trending. And trending would be when somebody has the first 4 macro minerals in a pattern. I'm going to show you right now. So there's a trend. If you came back with a high calcium, magnesium, and a low sodium and potassium, Dr. Eck, after doing over 200,000 hair mineral analyses, came up with these similarities, which is what's called a trend. The medical industry would call it a clinical trial, right? But this is like huge because that is based sometimes on 1,000 people. This is like 200,000 people, or hair mineral analysis, as I should say. And every time he saw this pattern, he started creating definitions and causes and signs and symptoms of what that pattern gave to people. And I have at least 3 dozen of these that Dr. Eck and Dr. Larry Wilson created together. I know Dr. Larry Wilson was responsible for quite a bit of them. So I'm not going to give Dr. Eck all the credit for this, but this is really cool work because then it makes people like sit there and go, well, how could this have happened? Well, it could have happened by you pushing yourself beyond where you should have, attitude or lifestyle, right? And in some situations, it's people pushing themselves physically in one end and spiritually in another. So that's what a trend is. So getting back to this, let's look at this lab report. Now, calcium, magnesium, and copper tend to work together and they displace zinc, selenium, and chromium. All right. Now I'm going to really want to go over your head right now because I want you to understand the complexity of this. Mercury and lead work together and displace calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and zinc. See that? So if your calcium is not available, you can uptake mercury and lead. You weren't chewing on thermometers as a child. There's plenty of mercury on the planet. Go into the ocean. There's mercury everywhere. It's out there. We have it on our planet. It's here for a reason. It's a good thing too, because if anything comes to our planet that isn't used to those heavy metals, they will die from the toxicity of them. If you watch the War of the Worlds, there's truth in that. So it's not a bad thing. But what should happen is, say you have some arsenic in your water, and then it's not toxic levels, it's what it's supposed to be, and you drink it. That arsenic, if you have a biochemically balanced body, that arsenic should come in and it should go out. And your elimination systems should absolutely take care of you. It's not like you're going and drinking arsenic. It's just an environmental arsenic. Tiny, tiny little bits and pieces. So when I look at these levels of toxic metals, I want to see them coming out of the body because they're part of our world. I have high aluminum. You're not eating off of aluminum foil. There's aluminum everywhere. That's the first thing to get your brain around. Don't ever look at it like I am doing something wrong, because guess what? That's a stress reaction. It's just part of your environment, and as easily as you got it into your body is going to be able to get rid of it nice and slowly as you start to bring yourself back to balance. Calcium magnesium ratios, which are down here, it's the relationship between these 2 minerals, affect insulin reactivity. I'm not going to use the D word. You know what insulin reactivity is. Sodium, manganese, potassium, and zinc work together, synergizing with calcium, manganese, sodium, and zinc. See that? They all synergize and work together. So right there, if you drop sodium, which by the way calcium does, you're going to screw up potassium, sodium, manganese, and zinc. And what did I just tell you about zinc? Zinc plays a big role in copper. I'm not going to start going. It's going to really blow your mind. So the sodium-potassium ratio is your vitality and inflammatory response and your degenerative disease and ability to be able to digest protein. I'm going to give you a little clue on that one. That's big. And guess what lowers sodium-potassium levels? Calcium. Calcium lowers sodium-potassium. So your sodium and potassium ratio is so important because if you don't have a good ratio, you could eventually create and manifest degenerative diseases. Your calcium-potassium ratio is your thyroid effect and energy. The relationship between calcium and potassium. That's all it is. It's your thyroid effect. So if your calcium's all the way up here and your potassium's all the way down here, your thyroid's going to be off. It may not show up on your T3, T4, but guess what? Your thyroid energy is off. And it's all biochemistry. Sodium, magnesium, that should say ratio, is your adrenal effect. Very easy to see if your adrenals are overactive or underactive, your thyroid is overactive or underactive, just by reading a hair mineral analysis. And then iron, manganese, chromium, selenium, and aluminum work together. Look, aluminum is in there. Why? Because aluminum loves iron. It antagonizes with manganese and iron, and it displaces it and has effects on iron, chromium, and selenium. They're called the three amigos, iron, chromium, and selenium, and aluminum is actually the fourth amigo. So aluminum now in processed foods is crazy. So if you're eating anything that is processed, chances are it's gone through some type of aluminum at some point, and it's picked up particles, and it's going to be very easy for your body to get aluminum. And guess what? That processed food is probably so low in nutrition. Now you're double dosing on not giving your body enough nutrition and giving it a little extra aluminum. Important. Cadmium displaces zinc and copper. I cannot even start to go past this point. I mean, this is just crazy information. Arsenic displaces magnesium and calcium. Zinc and copper are antagonistic to each other. So if you have one more than the other, you're going to drop down. Somebody who's high in copper tends to have stretch marks, thin skin. Somebody who's high in copper tends to have coloration and dark circles around their eyes. Somebody who's high in zinc tends to develop things that are a bit more, a little bit harder in their personality. Ratio is responsible for the immune system as well, the zinc and copper relationship and the reproductive energy. Copper is really important to have in a good place for your reproduction and all your reproductive organs. And phosphorus affects on protein and carbohydrate intolerance, which is why the calcium phosphorus ratio is important for protein synthesis and cell membranes and bone formations. That's complex, and that's just the surface, because a lot of those were independent on their displacements and their ability to be able to move up and down. I don't want to give you everything so that you try to, do things by your self too much, because it's important that you work with somebody that has a mastery of this. So if I haven't gotten your attention yet, there is more to this than you could ever imagine. And I think the last and the biggest thing that I can say about hair mineral analysis is so many people go into it like it's a lab test and they're going to get, this amazing information, just like people that come in for their first neuromuscular massage and think that I'm going to correct every ache and pain on their body in an hour, or somebody who starts a diet and thinks they're going to be skinny in a month, right? Or somebody who starts a workout program and thinks that they're going to be fit within, a 3-week period. They're all the same. It's the beginning of working with an alternative therapy. All the alternative therapies are there for you to be preventative and proactive. They're not there to give you an answer on an immediacy, which everybody is looking for. But I can trust you will understand this when I say, if you're listening to this at all, that it will be the best decision that you do. And once you start a pattern of understanding that this is something that you should have in your life, then you will start to understand exercise and the proper amount of exercise to get, and that what that does to your biochemistry. And you'll start to get body work and good body work from a private therapist, and you'll start to understand what that does to your world. And you'll start to eat better because you're going to understand how much of that importance that is in your biochemistry. And you're going to start to meditate. And by the way, I have a buzz meditation that I launched on my YouTube channel with my bees. And you're going to start to understand how important it is to give your brain a break. And you're going to start to find yourself again, or for the first time, and understand the gift that was given to you by all of these masters. And so when you get your first hair mineral analysis, you're not going to look at it as something that you're trying to get an answer from, but you're going to look at it as the start of a journey that's going to continue for the rest of your life. And it's going to be a long life, because you will not end up with a calcium shell. You will end up utilizing your minerals for as long as you live, and you will live for a good, healthy life as you have chosen. Notice how I really bounced around that one, but I don't want to say anything about age, because everybody has different perspectives on what longevity is. But I want everybody to be healthy until the day they pass. So there it is. So I hope you enjoyed this. This was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. But I wanted to really explain it to you and hope that you get some good information out of this. And I'll dive deeper into some of these minerals and maybe a few other things that I haven't covered on a topic on this, with some general information. So keep watching that rollback time. And if you haven't already, there is a Balanced Naturally program now that I launched, which is just a fun program to kind of hit all kinds of bases with things that I'm doing in my life. And I'm going out and starting to be interactive with my clients on the road now, which is a lot of fun. So thank you. And if you have any questions, or if you're interested in hair mineral analysis, then you can email me to physiobodyholistics@gmail.com. Have a great day.